The cold bit into my skin through the thin camping gear. The air smelled of damp earth and pine needles. Oh! I shivered, not just from the chill, but from a dawning horror that was slowly, sickeningly settling in my gut. They left me. They actually left me. The fire was out, just smoldering embers, and the tent flap was open, flapping uselessly in the breeze. Their bags were gone. Their car was gone. Everything was gone. This wasn't a prank. This was abandonment. My name is Alex. And this was supposed to be our big annual camping trip. Mike, Sarah, Jake, and me. We'd been inseparable since high school, or so I thought. We rented a cabin by a lake for a few days, hiked, cooked over the fire, and stayed up late talking nonsense. It was our tradition. This time we decided to rough it a bit more, just tents, a fire pit, deep in the woods. Mike was always the one who knew the best spots. He chose this one, way off the beaten path, no cell service. Just us. We had a pretty good first night, lots of laughs, the usual. Drank a bit too much cheap beer. I remember them teasing me about my fear of bears, even though I'd always just joked about it. Mike had said something about me being too much of a homebody, not adventurous enough. Sarah giggled, and Jake just shrugged. I laughed it off, but later, alone in my sleeping bag, something felt a little off, like their jokes had an edge. I woke up before dawn, needing to use the makeshift bathroom behind a cluster of trees. That's when I noticed the silence. Too quiet. No snores from Mike's tent, no rustling from Sarah and Jake's. I walked over, my breath misting in the frigid air. Both tents were collapsed, empty shells. My heart started to thump, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. I stumbled to where the car had been parked, just tire tracks in the dirt. Deep, fresh tracks. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed its way up my throat. They were gone. Not a note, not a text message they knew wouldn't go through anyway. Just gone. This wasn't a prank. A prank is funny. Prank doesn't leave you stranded miles from anywhere with only the clothes on your back and a half-eaten bag of chips. A prank doesn't feel like a punch to the gut. This felt like a punch to the gut. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe they went to get more supplies. No, they took their bags. Maybe they had an emergency. No, they would have woken me. They would have. Mike had my spare car key for emergencies. He always did. He could have just driven my car, he didn't. They took theirs. This was deliberate. The sun started to peek through the trees, casting long, accusing shadows. I was alone, truly alone. The reality of it crashed over me like an icy wave. I had no idea where I was exactly. I vaguely remembered a turn off a gravel road, then a long, winding dirt track. Miles, so many miles. I started walking. I didn't know which way was out, so I just picked a direction, hoping it was the way we came in. Every step was agony, not just physically as my feet started to ache, but emotionally. My mind replayed every interaction, every word from the night before, searching for a clue, a sign I missed. Was there a look, a whispered joke? Nothing obvious, just the usual banter, or what I thought was the usual banter. Hours passed, the sun climbed higher. My throat was dry, my stomach rumbled with a hollow ache. Doubt crept in, an insidious whisper. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe I did something, but what? I tried to be a good friend. I listened. I helped. I always paid my share, usually more. I was always there for them, always. The road seemed endless. My legs burned, blisters formed on my heels. I hallucinated their car pulling up, Sarah leaning out the window, laughing, telling me it was just a joke, but it never happened. It was just the silence of the woods, broken only by my ragged breathing and the crunch of gravel under my worn sneakers. Late in the afternoon, when I was seriously considering just collapsing by the side of the road and waiting, praying for someone, anyone, to drive by, I saw it. A faint shimmer in the distance, the main road. Hope, raw and desperate, surged through me. I stumbled the last few hundred yards, collapsing onto the asphalt, tears streaming down my face, a mix of relief and continued disbelief. I stuck out my thumb. Cars whizzed by, drivers casting wary glances. No one stopped. I didn't blame them. I probably looked like a wild animal, dirty and disheveled. More time passed. The sun began to dip, painting the sky in fiery oranges and purples. Despair threatened to swallow me whole again. Then, a beat-up pickup truck slowed down, pulled over. Kindly-looking old man with a weathered face asked if I needed a ride. I mumbled something about getting lost, about my friends having to leave unexpectedly. I couldn't bring myself to say they abandoned me. He just nodded, a knowing look in his eyes, and told me to hop in. He dropped me off at the edge of town near the bus station. I thanked him profusely. He just said, "Be safe, son," and drove off. I had just enough cash in my wallet for a bus ticket home. The bus ride was long, an endless blur of passing trees and flickering streetlights. I stared out the window, numb. The anger was building now, slowly, steadily, replacing the fear and the hurt. They left me in the woods, miles from anywhere. With nothing, they could have at least left me a phone, or a note, or just driven me home. When I finally stepped off the bus in my hometown, the familiar streets looked alien. It was late, past midnight. I walked the last few blocks to my house, the house I owned, the house we all shared. Shared, that was the word. Mike, Sarah, and Jake had been living with me for the past year, ever since their leases ran out and they were looking for a place. I had a spare room, then another. It made sense. We were friends. They said they'd pay me rent eventually once they got on their feet. I didn't push it. They were family. Or so I thought. The porch light was off. The windows were dark. My key slid into the lock, the old familiar click I'd heard 1,000 times. Except it didn't click. It wouldn't turn. I tried again, jiggling it, pushing harder. Nothing. Cold dread seeped into my bones, a deeper, colder dread than even being abandoned in the woods. I tried the spare key I kept hidden under a loose brick. It didn't work either. My breath hitched. The locks. They were new. The old brass knob was gone, replaced by a shiny silver one with a deadbolt I didn't recognize. My stomach dropped. They didn't just abandon me in the woods. They evicted me. From my own house. While I was gone, my mind reeled. This wasn't a prank. This was a calculated, cruel, deliberate act of betrayal. My home, my sanctuary, the place I shared with them. They took it, they planned this. Camping trip was just a distraction. A way to get me out of the house so they could move their stuff in, change the locks, and then just leave me to rot. A wave of pure, unadulterated rage washed over me, burned away the last vestiges of hurt, of sadness, of confusion. It left behind a hard, crystalline resolve. They thought they were so clever. They thought they won. They thought they got away with it. I pulled out my phone. No service in the woods, but now, back in civilization, it chirped to life. A flood of notifications. I ignored them all. I scrolled through my contacts. Found the number. I called the 24-hour locks. "Yes," I said. My voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. I need my locks changed as soon as possible. And I need them to be really, really secure. I just got home, and someone changed them on me. Chilling smiles spread across my face. A grim, humorless thing. They left me on a prank camping trip. I am home. The locks are changed. Not their locks. Mine on my house. The house they thought was theirs now. Oh, but the night was young. Good luck, you twisted pieces of garbage. Good luck. The locksmith arrived in less than an hour. A burly guy named Frank with a kind face and tired eyes. He didn't ask many questions, just looked at the new lock on my door, the one I didn't recognize. I told him I'd been out of town for a few days, visiting family, and came back to find someone had messed with my locks. It was a half-truth, but good enough. He nodded, probably heard it all before. Divorce, roommate drama, who knew? He just started working, his tools clinking softly in the night. While he worked, my mind raced. The anger was still there, a hot coal in my chest, but it was now mixed with a chilling calm. This wasn't a random act. This was planned. The camping trip, the remote location, the lack of cell service, it all clicked into place. They wanted me out of the way, completely isolated, while they executed their move, and they were so sure I wouldn't get back. Or if I did, it would be too late. Frank finished the front door. Then I had him do the back door too. He showed me the old lock mechanism he'd taken out. It was indeed brand new, probably installed just hours before I got home. They had been efficient. Too efficient. Need anything else, kid? Frank asked, wiping grease from his hands. Yeah, I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. I need new locks on my garage, and maybe a couple of window locks too, if you have them. Heavy duty. Frank raised an eyebrow, but just nodded. Sure thing, you really want to secure this place down. He had no idea. This wasn't just about securing my place. This was about making a statement. A very loud, very clear statement. This was about showing them that their cruel game had consequences, and that I was no longer a pawn in their twisted little world. As Frank worked on the garage, I paced my living room. It felt different. The air was heavy, stale, like they had been here invading my space, and then cleared out, leaving a void. I noticed little things. A smudge on the wall where Sarah always leaned. A faint scent of Mike's cologne near the couch. Jake's messy stack of comic books was gone from the coffee table. They didn't just change the locks. They moved their stuff out. All of it. This wasn't a prank. It was an eviction. But not just an eviction from a shared space. It was an eviction from my own life, from what I thought was my core group of friends. My family almost. I had let them live here rent-free for over a year. I bought most of the groceries. I paid all the utilities. I covered their share of the internet bill more times than I could count. I loaned them money they never repaid. I listened to their problems. I celebrated their small wins. I thought I was being a good person, a good friend. They thought I was a fool. The prank was the ultimate humiliation. Leave me in the wilderness. Let me think I am alone, abandoned, that maybe I was the problem, while they took everything I had, my home, my sense of security, my trust. But their mistake was underestimating me. They thought I'd just curl up and disappear. They thought I'd be too weak, too broken to fight back. They thought wrong. After Frank left, leaving me with a new set of keys that felt heavy and powerful in my palm, I started to formulate my revenge. It wasn't about violence. It wasn't about property damage. It was about turning their own tactics against them. An eye for an eye, but with locks. and a healthy dose of psychological warfare. They still had their stuff here, probably packed away somewhere in the garage or a storage unit, assuming they'd come back to get it at their leisure. My stomach churned. I walked through the house, room by room. My room was undisturbed, but the guest rooms, the ones they used, were empty. Stripped bare. No stray socks, no forgotten books, nothing. They had planned this for a while. My anger hardened into a cold, sharp blade. What was their endgame? To sell the house? No, it's in my name. To just live here, squatting, and claim it was theirs? Unlikely to work. But they must have had some plan, some desperate scheme. I thought about their living situation before they moved in with me. Mike was couch surfing. Sarah was in a tiny, overpriced apartment, and Jake was crashing with his parents. They were always complaining about money, about not having a place. This house, my house, was their solution. A free ride, a comfortable life at my expense. And when they decided they wanted it all, they just cut me out. Like I was a parasite, not a friend. My plan began to take shape. Simple, effective, and deeply satisfying. They had changed the locks on my house. Now I would change the locks on their lives. They didn't have anywhere else to go, not really. Mike lived closest, about 20 minutes away, in a crappy little apartment that his parents owned, which he rarely used because he was always at my place. Sarah was in another town, but she worked here, and Jake was with his parents even further away. This house was their base, their sanctuary, they called it. The irony choked me. I pulled out my laptop, shaking slightly as I typed. I needed information. Their schedules, their routines. I knew them better than anyone, or so I thought. Mike was usually at his office until late. Sarah worked shifts, but her days off were Tuesdays and Fridays. Jake was always at the local gym in the mornings. I knew their habits, their weaknesses. I smiled again, a grim, determined smile. They wanted to play games? Oh, we were going to play. But this time, I was holding all the cards. I was home. My locks were chained. And they were about to find out what good luck really meant. I pulled out my phone and started searching for another locksmith. One who could do a specific, discreet job for me. One who wouldn't ask too many questions. One who could handle an emergency eviction for a landlord. This was going to be fun. For me, not so much for them. The house felt like a tomb. It was my house, yes, the deed was in my name. But it had been their house too, filled with their laughter, their arguments, their clutter. Now it was just empty. The furniture they had brought in, their personal touches, all gone. Mike's ridiculous giant beanbag chair was gone from the living room. Sarah's collection of artisanal candles was gone from the mantelpiece. Jake's perpetually half-eaten bag of chips was gone from the kitchen counter. They had systematically stripped it bare, taking everything they could claim was theirs. Even the cheap, ugly curtains in the guest room which Sarah had picked out were gone. I walked through the silence, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. It was like they had never been here. It was worse. It was like they had been here and then systematically erased themselves, leaving behind only the ghost of what was. The faint outlines of their photos on the walls, the indentations on the rug where their furniture had sat. Ghosts. A pang of genuine heartache went through me. This wasn't just about furniture. It was about memories. Hundreds of them trapped within these walls. The night we celebrated Mike getting his first big promotion, ordering enough pizza to feed a small army. Sarah's birthday, when we decorated the living room with fairy lights and surprised her with a ridiculously oversized cake. Jake's constant attempts to teach me how to play video games, his patient explanations, despite my utter lack of skill. We had built something here, a home, a shared life. Or so I thought. Now all I saw was the hollowness. The illusion shattered. They hadn't built anything with me. They had simply extracted from me my space, my resources, my trust. I remembered the day they moved in. Mike had called me in a panic. His lease was up, and he had nowhere to go. I offered him the spare room. Then Sarah's landlord raised her rent, and she said she couldn't afford it alone. I said sure, she could take the other empty room. Jake, always tagging along, somehow just started spending more and more time here, until he practically lived on the couch, claiming he was saving up for a place of his own. I didn't mind. I liked having them around. Felt like a proper home, bustling and full of life, not just my solitary existence after my parents passed. I was lonely, that was the truth. After my parents died, the house felt too big, too quiet. Having them here filled that void. I thought they were filling it with genuine friendship. They filled it with their convenience. I tried to recall when things started to change. It wasn't a sudden shift. It was subtle, insidious. First, it was the small things. My groceries disappearing faster than usual, my tools not being returned to their proper place. Then it escalated. My car, which I often left unlocked in the driveway, had a full tank one day, then mysteriously ran out of gas the next, and I'd find an empty receipt for a fast food meal I hadn't bought. My savings account, which I kept a close eye on, occasionally had small, inexplicable withdrawals. I'd chalk it up to a mistake, or blame myself for not tracking something properly. I trusted them implicitly. They became more comfortable, too comfortable. They started treating the house like it was theirs. Changing the thermostat without asking. Noxty their own parties without checking if I was okay with it. Using my things, my clothes, my toiletries, without so much as a by your leave. When I tried to bring it up gently, they'd laugh it off. Oh, Alex, you are such a neat freak. We're family. What's mine is yours, right? They would turn it back on me, making me feel unreasonable, petty. The rent. That was a big one. They promised they'd start paying as soon as they got stable jobs. Mike had a job, a good one. Sarah worked shifts, sure, but she seemed to have plenty of money for new clothes and nights out. Jake never really got a job. He dabbled in online gaming, promising it would make him rich. They'd always have an excuse. My landlord from my old place is still hounding me for back rent. My car broke down. I had an unexpected medical bill. I always believed them. I always gave them more time. I always paid the bills myself. The worst part was, I think they saw me as weak. As a pushover, as someone they could easily manipulate. My generosity, my desire for companionship, my trust, they weaponized it. They saw an opportunity and they took it. The prank, camping trip, the perfect cover. Get me out of the house. Make sure I was isolated. Give them enough time to move everything out. Change the locks and disappear. Then when I finally made it back, exhausted and broken, I'd find myself locked out of my own home. They probably figured I'd call the police, but without proof of ownership, or with them claiming I was just a roommate they'd evicted. It would be a messy legal battle, and they knew how much I hated confrontation. But they forgot one crucial detail. The house was mine. The deed was in my name. The utility bills, the property taxes, everything. Mine. I wasn't just a roommate they were kicking out. I was the homeowner. And I was back. I walked into the kitchen, the heart of the home, now barren. Custom-built spice rack my dad and I made was still there, but half the spices were gone. Even some of the pots and pans were missing. They really did take everything they could get their hands on. My hands clenched into fists. The rage returned hot and purifying. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was about theft. I sat down at the kitchen table, the one my mom used to bake cookies on, now cold and empty. I pulled out my phone. I didn't need to scroll. I already knew their addresses. Mike's apartment, Sarah's old place, though she rarely stayed there. Jake's parents' house. I had all the information I needed. I had a plan, a solid plan. And it was going to hit them where it hurt the most. Their false sense of security, their new home. They thought they had won. They thought they had outsmarted me. But the game wasn't over. It had just begun. And this time, I was playing by my own rules. Rules that involved a 24-hour locksmith and a profound understanding of karmic retribution. Good luck indeed. The first call came a few hours after I had the locks changed on my own house. My phone buzzed, startling me. It was Mike. I stared at the screen, a strange mix of dread and anticipation swirling in my stomach. I let it ring and ring. Then it went to voicemail. He called again. And again. And again. 3 more times in a row, within minutes. Each buzz of my phone was a tiny victory. A confirmation that they were starting to realize their plan had gone sideways. I imagined their confusion, their dawning horror. It was a sweet, dark thought. Then Sarah called. Her name flashed on the screen, a sickly bright beacon in the darkness of my room. I ignored her too. Then Jake. He rarely called, preferring texts, so his call felt more desperate. I let it go to voicemail. My phone blew up for the next hour. Calls from all 3 of them, texts piling up like desperate little messages in a bottle. I didn't read them. Not yet. I wanted to savor this moment, this quiet retribution. I wanted them to stew, to panic, to wonder what was happening. I knew exactly what was happening on their end. They had likely returned to my house, their supposed new domain, expecting to find it just as they left. They expected to walk right in, perhaps to gloat, perhaps to celebrate their success. Instead, they found a very different kind of locked door. My house was silent now, but it wasn't the empty, desolate silence of moments ago. It was a new kind of silence, a peaceful silence, a silence that felt like a quiet strength. The new locks hummed with a quiet satisfaction. This was my space again, my sanctuary. I waited. I knew they would try something else. They always did. They were predictable in their self-serving desperation. Around dawn, I heard it. A car pulling up, not mine but theirs. The distinct rumble of Mike's old beat-up sedan. Then muffled voices, growing louder. I crept to the window, pulling back a corner of the curtain. There they were, Mike, Sarah, and Jake, standing on my porch, looking exactly as I had imagined them. Confused, then angry, then frantic. Mike was jiggling the doorknob, pushing against the door. Sarah was pacing, talking rapidly into her phone. Jake was just staring, wide-eyed, his mouth slightly agape. They tried the back door. I heard their footsteps crunching on the gravel. I smiled. Dead end. Then the garage door. I'd had Frank put in a new heavy-duty deadbolt. They weren't getting in there either. I heard Mike shout, a frustrated roar. What the hell? Who did this? Sarah's voice sharp and high-pitched. It has to be him. He must have gotten back somehow. Jake sounding whiny. But how? We were so careful. My smile widened. Oh, you were careful, were you? You thought you were so clever. I watched them argue, point fingers, their perfect little plan crumbling around them. It was a beautiful sight. Then they started banging on the door. Hard. "Alex, Alex, open up. We know you are in there." Mike's voice rough with anger. I stayed silent, motionless, a statue of pure, unyielding resolve. Sarah started yelling too. "Alex, this isn't funny. We need to get in. Our stuff is in there. My stuff is in there," I thought. "My life is in there, and you tried to take..." The banging continued for a while, growing weaker as their frustration mounted. Eventually, they gave up. I heard their car door slam, the engine roar to life, and the sound of tires screeching as they sped away. I finally checked my phone. The voicemails were a symphony of their unraveling. Mike's first message. "Alex, hey man, where are you?" "We're at the house, the locks are changed." "Is this some kind of joke? Open up, dude, it's freezing out here." His voice was trying to be casual, but there was an edge of annoyance. Then Sarah's, "Alex, you need to call us back right now. This isn't funny. You are scaring us. What's going on with the house?" Her voice was laced with a fake concern. Jake's, "Alex, dude, seriously, this isn't cool. We need to get in. We're getting wet out here." My laptop's inside, whiny, self-pitying. And the next batch, after they realized they couldn't get in. Mike, furious. "Alex, you better open this damn door. What are you playing at? Our stuff is in there. We need to get our things. This isn't your house to lock us out of." That last line made my blood boil. "This isn't your house." He actually said that. The audacity. Sarah, crying, "Alex, please, we didn't mean it. It was just a joke. A stupid, dumb prank. We didn't think you'd actually get back so fast. Please, we're so sorry. Just let us get our things." Oh, now it was a joke. Now they were sorry. Too little, too late. Jake practically sobbing. "Alex, my entire life is in there. You can't just do this. We're friends. Remember, we're friends." The hypocrisy was nauseating. I deleted the voicemails. All of them, without a second thought. I wasn't interested in their false apologies or their desperate pleas. Their words were hollow, their crocodile tears meaningless. They had made their choice. They had shown me exactly who they were. And now it was my turn. I finished my coffee, a strong black brew that tasted of victory. The sun was fully up now, streaming through my clean, empty windows. The house felt lighter, freer. I felt lighter, freer. I felt lighter, freer. The anger was still there, but it was a cold, controlled anger now. A tool, not a torment. I opened my laptop. I had a few more calls to make. Calls to locksmiths, yes, but not for my house. For theirs, Mike's apartment. Sarah's old place. Jake's parents' house, specifically the garage door he used to get in and out. This wasn't just about my locks. This was about making sure they understood the true meaning of being locked out, of having their world, their sense of security ripped away. The good luck I had thought about last night felt even more potent now. It wasn't a curse, it was a promise. Promise that their lives were about to get a whole lot harder, and I would be watching. From my own secure home, the calls stopped. For a few hours at least, I knew it was the calm before the storm. They were regrouping, planning, probably cursing my name. I used the time to call the locksmiths I'd researched, setting up appointments for Mike's apartment and Jake's parents' house. Sarah was a bit trickier, as she seemed to be drifting between places, but I had a hunch. I felt a grim satisfaction as I gave the instructions, explaining I was a landlord, dealing with difficult tenants who had violated their lease. Another half-truth, but it worked. By midday my phone started buzzing again, but this time the calls were from mutual friends. People we all knew. People I considered myself close to. First, it was Dave. "Hey Alex, what's going on? Mike and Sarah just called me. They sound pretty upset. Said you locked them out of the house. Is everything okay?" I took a deep breath. This was it. The rumor mill. "David," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Mike and Sarah and Jake abandoned me in the middle of nowhere on a camping trip. They drove off and left me stranded. While I was gone, they broke into my house, moved all their stuff out, and changed my locks. I got home, had to get a locksmith to change my own locks to get into my own house. So, no, David, everything is not okay." There was a stunned silence on the other end. "Wait, what? They did what?" "No way, Mike wouldn't do that." "He did," I said. "They all did. And now they're trying to spin it like I am the bad guy, because I secured my own property after they tried to steal." David stammered. I don't know what to say. That's insane." "It is," I agreed. "And if they try to tell you anything else, they're lying." Then came Maria. Her tone was already accusatory. "Alex, what is wrong with you?" Sarah is in tears. She said you are being completely unreasonable, that it was just a joke and you are overreacting, and you kicked them out for no reason. My blood ran cold. So that was their story, a joke? I repeated, my voice rising with disbelief. "They left me in the middle of the wilderness, Maria. No phone, no water, miles from civilization. And then they evicted me from my own house while I was gone. That's not a joke. That's a crime. And I didn't kick them out for no reason. They tried to steal my house," Maria sputtered. But Sarah said you were just mad about them staying rent-free, and you just decided to throw them out." "They offered to pay rent, Maria, they just never did. For over a year. And that's not why they left me in the woods. They did it so they could move their stuff out and change the locks without me knowing." "Dude, that sound like a joke to you?" Maria was quiet. I guess not." "You guess not?" I pushed. "Maria, they tried to literally take my home from me, and they put my life in danger. If that's a joke to them, then they're even sicker than I thought." The conversations were exhausting. Some friends were immediately supportive, horrified by what they heard. Others were hesitant, clearly swayed by Mike and Sarah's emotional pleas. A few, the ones who are always closer to Mike or Sarah, dismissed me outright. "You are clearly unhinged, Alex. Mike would never do that." Or, "Maybe you just misunderstood, Alex. It was heartbreaking." Losing my supposed best friends was one thing. Losing my entire social circle, or at least seeing it splinter, was another. People I had known for years, shared countless memories with, were now looking at me with suspicion or pity or outright disdain. The betrayal kept rippling outwards. I found myself having to justify my pain, defend my sanity, explain the horrific details to people who simply couldn't wrap their heads around such a level of malice from people they knew. It felt like I was being tried in a court of public opinion, and the jury was divided, swayed by the tears and false narratives of the very people who had wronged me. Then the rumors started appearing online. Anonymous posts on local community forums, vague references on social media. "Beware of a guy named Alex. He's unhinged. Kicks friends out of his house for no reason. Crazy landlord story. Left friends stranded and then changed locks on them." They were trying to poison the well, to make me out to be the villain. I knew it was them. They were desperate. They needed a narrative that painted me as the aggressor, not the victim. They needed to control the story, because if the truth came out, their lives would be ruined. Their reputations would be destroyed. The online attacks stung, It was one thing to explain things to people you knew. It was another to see strangers judging you, making assumptions based on carefully crafted lies. I wanted to scream. I wanted to post the entire truth, every agonizing detail. But I held back. I knew that engaging in an online shouting match would only legitimize their claims. Instead, I decided to let my actions speak for themselves. The locksmith appointments were set. Mike's apartment was first. I used the landlord excuse again. He probably wouldn't even be home. I had the keys from when he was living at my place. And I needed to grab something from his. The locksmith just needed confirmation of ownership. I had it. Mike's parents technically owned the apartment, but Mike was the tenant. I provided an old doctored lease agreement I'd found online, with my name listed as the managing agent. It was a stretch, but given the circumstances, I felt no guilt. Then Jake's parents' house. This one would be trickier. I couldn't just change the locks on the whole house, but I knew Jake's usual entry point. The garage. He practically lived out there in his gaming den. I had the key to that garage from when Jake and I helped his dad organize it last year. That was my target. Just that one lock, to lock him out of his main access point. The thought of their faces when they realized what I had done filled me with a perverse sense of satisfaction. They tried to make me homeless. I would return the favor, in a small but significant way. Not with physical violence, not with destruction, but with the cold, hard reality of being locked out, of having their sense of security, their comfort ripped away. Just like mine had been. The exhaustion was setting in now, a deep, bone-weary fatigue that went beyond physical tiredness. It was the exhaustion of betrayal, of having your entire world turned upside down. But underneath it, a quiet strength was growing. I had survived the woods. I had gotten home. I had secured my house. And now I was fighting back. The online rumors faded slightly as the day wore on, perhaps because Mike and Sarah had other, more pressing issues to deal with. Issues with their own locks. I wondered what they were saying now, to their mutual friends, to anyone who would listen. Would they still be crying about a prank? Or would they be panicking about their own precarious living situations? I hoped it was the latter. I really, really hoped. The locksmith calls were successful. Mike's apartment and Jake's garage now had new, unpickable locks. I paid in cash, discreetly. I hadn't heard from any of them since the early morning, which meant they were either completely preoccupied with their new problem, or too ashamed to reach out, or both. I hoped it was both. As the quiet of my once again secure home settled around me, my mind started to shift from revenge to understanding. Why? Why would they do this? It wasn't just the convenience of free rent. It wasn't just a sick joke. This was premeditated, malicious. There had to be a deeper reason. I started to go through old documents, old emails, anything that might shed some light. My parents' will, property deeds, financial statements. My house, which I had inherited, was fully paid off. It was a significant asset. Mike knew that. He was always asking about my finances. Jokingly, I thought at the time. Man, you are set for life, Alex. No mortgage, no rent. Living the dream. Then a memory surfaced. About 6 months ago, Mike had mentioned investing in a small rental property. He had talked about pooling resources, about how it would be a great way to build equity. He'd even suggested that, since my house was mortgage-free, I could use it as collateral for a loan to invest in their joint venture. I had laughed it off. I was risk-averse. Plus, I didn't have that kind of money to just throw around. But what if he wasn't joking? What if that was the plan all along? to get me to put up my house, then somehow cut me out of the deal. No, that seemed too convoluted. Then I remembered a conversation from about 2 months ago. Mike and Sarah were talking about some financial trouble one of their relatives was in. Something about needing a large sum of money quickly. They had seemed desperate. I remembered offering to help in a small way, loaning them a few $100s. They never took me up on it. But they had seemed to appreciate the offer. Could it be about money? My house, fully paid off, was worth a lot. Maybe they saw a way to get their hands on it. But how? I was the sole owner. They couldn't just sell it, or could they? I pulled out the property deed. My name, clear as day, no one else's. I checked my bank accounts online. Everything seemed normal. No huge unauthorized withdrawals, beyond the small ones I'd dismissed before. Then it hit me, something Mike had said a few weeks ago. He was complaining about his apartment, how his parents were planning to sell it soon, and he'd be out on the street. He joked, "Looks like I'll just have to live here forever, eh?" Alex, I'd laughed. He hadn't been laughing. What if they were trying to claim squatters' rights or adverse possession? I vaguely remembered hearing about that on some legal show. If people lived in a property for a certain amount of time, openly and without permission, they could potentially claim ownership. But I had given them permission. They were guests, they were friends. They were Zayn. This wasn't an abandonment. This was, I stopped. It clicked. They had abandoned me, but they weren't abandoning the house. They were trying to establish their exclusive claim to it. By getting me out, by changing the locks, they were signaling that they were now in sole possession. And by leaving me without a phone, without a way to immediately react, they might have hoped I wouldn't be able to contest it quickly enough. It was insane, but it fit. The camping trip was a way to create a period of absence. Changing the locks was to show they controlled the property. And moving their stuff out was to make it seem like my stuff was theirs, or that I had abandoned them. And their story to our mutual friends, about me kicking them out for no reason, was to cement that narrative. They weren't just trying to stay for free. They were trying to take the house from me entirely. The thought made me physically ill. To think that people I considered family, people I had opened my home and my heart to, would orchestrate such a malicious, calculated scheme. It wasn't just about money, it was about power, about control, about entitlement. They likely thought that by the time I managed to get back, disoriented and perhaps with no immediate proof of ownership to a passing police officer, they could have established themselves. Then drag me through a long, painful legal battle where they could fabricate stories about me inviting them to live there. And then, abandoning the property myself. It was a sick, twisted plan, and they were so close to getting away with it. If the old man hadn't picked me up, if I hadn't had that little bit of cash for the bus, if I hadn't thought to call the locksmith immediately, if I had just curled up and cried, they would have won. A cold fury settled in my bones. Not the hot, explosive anger from before, but a deep, chilling resolve. This wasn't just about my hurt feelings. This was about defending myself, my property, my very identity. They had tried to erase me. I pulled up the property tax records, my utility bills, everything with my name on it, proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that I was the sole owner. I took pictures of the empty rooms, the missing items. I started to compile a file, a thorough, undeniable record of what they had done. This wasn't just about locks anymore. This was about legal action, about making sure they faced the full consequences of their action. I also looked up the laws regarding adverse possession and squatters' rights in my state. The requirements were strict. Often years of continuous, open, hostile possession. They hadn't come close. They had merely tried to create the appearance of it. And they failed spectacularly, because I came home and I fought back. The realization of the depth of their betrayal was truly heartbreaking. It wasn't a sudden burst of anger that made them act. It was a cold, calculated plan hatched over weeks, maybe even months. Every laugh, every shared meal, every late-night conversation. Was it all a lie? Was I just a means to an end? The answer was a resounding yes. And that was the bitterest pill to swallow. My parents would have been devastated, but they also would have told me to fight, and I would. I would fight for my home, for my peace of mind, for the very principle of justice. They wanted my house. Now they wouldn't even have their own. My first call the next morning wasn't to a friend or to family, but to a lawyer. I explained the situation concisely, calmly. The abandonment, the changed locks, my return, their attempt to claim my house. The lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Miss Henderson, listened patiently, occasionally interjecting with a sharp question. When I finished, she was silent for a moment. "Mr. Peterson," she said, her voice firm. "This is a clear-cut case of attempted unlawful entry, theft, and potentially, if they were truly trying to claim adverse possession, a very serious fraud. Your evidence is compelling." I explained how I had changed the locks on Mike's apartment and Jake's garage. Miss Henderson's eyebrows went up. "While I understand the impulse for retaliation, Mr. Peterson, I must advise against any further self-help actions. We want to be entirely above board. However, given their actions, it's unlikely they have much legal recourse against you. We can address that if they pursue it." She then outlined the steps we would take. First, a cease and desist letter demanding they stop all communication, stop spreading rumors, and acknowledge that they have no claim to my property. Second, an official police report detailing the abandonment, the attempted eviction, and the theft of my belongings. Yes, theft. Those pots, pans, and half a spice rack counted. She assured me the police would take it seriously once they understood the full extent of the scheme. Third, a civil suit for damages, emotional distress, and any lost income from their non-payment of rent. It sounded daunting, but it also sounded like justice, like real consequences. Not just for me, but for them. The news of the legal action, once it filtered through my remaining social circles, had a profound effect. Some of the fence-sitters, the ones who had been swayed by Mike and Sarah's cries of, "It was just a joke," started to see the severity of the situation. It wasn't a joke when lawyers and police were involved. It was a criminal matter. I started receiving apologies from some of those friends. Not from Mike, Sarah, or Jake, of course, but from people who had doubted me. It was a small comfort, but a comfort nonetheless. It meant I wasn't completely alone. The police report was filed. It was a grueling process, recounting every detail of the camping trip, the walk home, the shock of the locked door. The officer, a gruff but sympathetic man, took notes diligently. He even went to the house to verify the new locks and the missing items. He told me they'd have a chat with Mike, Sarah, and Jake. I knew what that meant. A formal inquiry. It would be a stain on their records at the very least. Then came the calls. Not from mutual friends this time, but from Mike's parents. And Jake's parents. They were furious. Mike's dad, his voice booming down the line, demanded to know why I had changed the locks on Mike's apartment. "He's homeless now, Alex. You can't just do that." "Sir," I replied, my voice steady, "your son tried to make me homeless. He abandoned me in the wilderness and then attempted to steal my house." I simply ensured he couldn't access a property that I had legitimate reason to believe he was using to facilitate his ongoing scheme against me. Furthermore, I have documentation that places me as a managing agent for that property, which was necessary to secure it from a problematic tenant. It was a bold lie about the managing agent part, but Miss Henderson had advised to be vague and confident if challenged. There was a pause. He tried to steal your house. Yes, sir. My lawyer will be in touch with the full details. I've also filed a police report. The line went dead. Jake's mom was distraught. Alex, what is wrong with you? Jake can't get into the garage. His gaming setup, all his clothes, everything is in there. He says you are being vindictive. Ma'am, I said, repeating my rehearsed line. Your son, along with Mike and Sarah, abandoned me in the wilderness. They then broke into my home, moved their belongings out, and changed my locks, attempting to claim my property as their own. I merely secured access points that I was concerned they would continue to use to facilitate their unlawful activities against me. I also have a lawyer and have filed a police report. Perhaps you should ask your son why he would put himself in such a situation. She started to cry, but he's just a boy. He wouldn't do anything like that. Then you should ask him, Mom, I said and hung up. The weight of their parents' distress was heavy. I didn't enjoy causing them pain, but their children had caused me far, far more. And this was the only way they would truly understand the gravity of their children's actions. This was no longer a joke. This was real life, with real consequences. Mike, Sarah, and Jake were officially notified of the legal proceedings. The civil suit was for a significant amount, covering the emotional distress, the theft, and the year of unpaid rent. Even though I hadn't charged them, it was a fair approximation of the value of their occupancy. They were facing a potentially ruinous judgment, not to mention the possibility of criminal charges from the police investigation. I heard from one mutual friend, Emily, that Mike was living out of his car, hopping between friends' couches. Sarah had moved back to her small, overpriced apartment, apparently furious and claiming I was insane. Jake was stuck at his parents' house, complaining constantly about being unable to access his gaming cave in the garage. Their lives were falling apart, and I felt convicted. Part of me, the raw, wounded part, relished in their discomfort. They deserved it. They had sown the wind, now they were reaping the whirlwind. But another part, the part that remembered the good times, the laughter, the friendship, felt a profound sadness. It was like watching a slow-motion car crash, knowing you were the one who pushed the accelerator, but only because they had put you in the driver's seat and cut the brakes. The heartbreak of losing them, not just as friends, but as people I thought I knew, was a deep, aching wound. This wasn't a game. This was the end of a chapter of my life. And while justice felt good, it didn't fill the void they had left. But it did create space, space to heal, space to rebuild, space to find new ground. The house began to feel like my own again. Slowly, I started by getting rid of everything that even remotely reminded me of them. I boxed up the few remaining items they had left behind, mostly some old t-shirts and a broken phone charger, and donated them. I bought new curtains, I rearranged the furniture. I even repainted the living room a calm, serene blue, erasing the oppressive feeling that lingered from their presence. The silence was no longer heavy with absence. It was peaceful, a quiet hum of solitude. I cooked for myself simple meals and ate them at the kitchen table, enjoying the quiet. I read books in the living room, the one where Mike's giant beanbag used to sit. I rediscovered hobbies I had neglected while trying to accommodate their chaotic lives. I started jogging again. I joined a book club, Small steps but significant. Trust was the hardest thing to rebuild. Every new acquaintance felt like a potential threat. Every kind gesture, every friendly smile was met with a flicker of suspicion. Was this person genuine? Or were they just another predator, waiting for an opportunity? Miss Henderson had advised me to be cautious, but not to let their actions destroy my ability to connect with others. "You can't let them win twice, Mr. Peterson," she had said. So I tried. I went to the book club meeting, nervous but determined. I met genuinely kind people interested in the books, not in my life story. I didn't mention my recent ordeal. Not yet. It was too raw, too complicated to explain to strangers. I just listened, contributed, and tried to be present. It felt good. One evening, after a particularly fulfilling run, I stopped at a coffee shop I'd never visited before. The barista, a woman with bright, intelligent eyes and a warm smile, struck up a conversation about my running shoes. Her name was Chloe. We talked for a few minutes about running, about local trails, about good coffee. It was effortless. Normal. It was a breath of fresh air. I found myself lingering, enjoying the simple exchange. When I left, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Possibility. The legal process was slow, as Miss Henderson had warned. It was a lot of paperwork, depositions and waiting. Mike, Sarah, and Jake, through their own lawyers, which meant their parents were probably funding their defense, were denying everything, painting me as a vindictive fantasist. But my evidence was strong. The police report, the locksmith invoices, the property deeds, and my detailed chronological account of events. It was a mountain of truth against their flimsy mountain of lies. I had moments of weakness, of course. Moments when the hurt would resurface, a sharp stab of pain. I'd see a group of friends laughing together, and for a split second, I'd remember how it used to be. The easy camaraderie, the shared jokes. Then the bitter reality would set in, and the pain would turn into a cold, hard resolve. They had destroyed that, not me. I also learned to appreciate the quiet strength of the few friends who had stood by me. David and Maria. After she heard the full story from Miss Henderson, she became a fierce advocate, and a few others. They didn't push. They just listened. They offered support, not judgment. They helped me remember what true friendship felt like. It wasn't about convenience. It was about loyalty, empathy, and respect. The house, once a source of comfort, then a symbol of betrayal, was slowly becoming a true sanctuary again. I filled it with things that brought me joy, not just things that filled the void. Plants, art, books. It reflected me, not the distorted version of myself I had become while living with. I found myself looking at my reflection in the newly cleaned windows. I looked tired, yes, but also stronger. My eyes held a new depth, a certain resilience. The person staring back wasn't the naive, trusting Alex who had been left in the woods. This Alex had survived. This Alex had fought back. This Alex was rebuilding. The memory of the good luck I had uttered that first night came back to me. It wasn't just a threat. It was a challenge to them, to fate, and to myself. Could I endure this? Could I come out stronger? The answer, I realized, was a resounding yes. I still didn't know what the final legal outcome would be, but I knew one thing. I was no longer defined by their betrayal. I was defined by my own resilience. I was finding new ground, one step at a time. And the air in my home, my true home, smelled sweet and clean, of new beginnings. The day of the preliminary hearing arrived. It was less a dramatic courtroom showdown and more a formality, a chance for both sides to present their basic arguments, and for the judge to assess the strength of each case. I sat beside Miss Henderson, feeling a strange mix of apprehension and calm. Mike, Sarah, and Jake were there, seated across the room with their lawyers. They looked different. Mike seemed gaunt, his usual cocky grin replaced by a nervous frown. Sarah's eyes were red-rimmed, and she avoided my gaze, constantly fidgeting with her hands. Jake, typically restless, sat unusually still, his face pale. They looked defeated. The lawyer, a slick, expensive-looking man, presented their side. Tried to paint me as an unstable individual who had a falling out with his roommates, overreacted, and was now fabricating a story to get money and attention. Claimed the camping trip was a mutual decision for a cool-down period, and that they simply left because I was being erratic. He even tried to suggest I had changed my own locks to frame them. It was a desperate, unconvincing performance. When it was our turn, Miss Henderson was concise and devastating. She presented the police report, the locksmith invoices with timestamps, my property deeds, and the detailed timeline of their abandonment and subsequent attempt to take over my house. She showed pictures of the empty rooms, noting the missing items. She even had the camping supplies store provide a receipt for the specific gear they bought, showing it was their gear they took, not mine. The evidence was irrefutable. The judge listened, impassive, occasionally jotting notes. He asked a few sharp questions to their lawyer, who stumbled over his answers. He didn't ask me anything directly. He didn't need to. After the presentations, the judge called both legal teams to his chambers for a private discussion. Miss Henderson emerged a few minutes later, a slight smile on her face. "They want to settle," she whispered to me. "They know they don't have a leg to stand on. They're trying to avoid a full trial, and more importantly, criminal charges." My stomach clenched. A settlement. It meant avoiding the messy public trial. It meant an end to this chapter definitively. But it also meant I might not get the full satisfaction of seeing them truly punished in court. Yet, Miss Henderson had advised that a settlement, if fair, was often the best outcome. It brought swifter resolution and avoided the unpredictable nature of a jury. "What are the terms?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Full financial compensation for damages, emotional distress, and unpaid rent. And they have to sign a non-disclosure agreement, preventing them from speaking about this publicly or spreading any more rumors about you, and a no-contact order." The no-contact order. That was the crucial part for me. I wanted them out of my life, completely and irrevocably. I looked across the room at them. Mike's eyes met mine for a fleeting second. There was no defiance left, only a hollow emptiness. Sarah was still looking down, but a single tear traced a path down her cheek. Jake was staring blankly at the wall. They looked broken, and in that moment I felt a strange mix of emotions. Not triumph, not gloating, but a profound sense of sadness. This was the end of a friendship that had once meant everything to me. It wasn't glorious. It was just over. The settlement was signed a few weeks later. It was official. They would pay. They would disappear from my life. It was closure in its own way. Not the dramatic courtroom victory I might have once dreamed of, but a quiet, definitive separation. Police investigation continued, separate from the civil suit. I knew it would likely result in formal charges, perhaps even arrests. But I wasn't involved in that part anymore. My part was done. My justice had been served. The money came through, a substantial sum. It felt like blood money, but it also represented my lost time, my shattered trust, and the trauma they had inflicted. I used a portion of it to invest. to rebuild my financial security, and to make some more improvements to my home. The rest, I put aside for a rainy day, a reminder of the price of blind trust. I never saw Mike, Sarah, or Jake again after that hearing. I heard through the grapevine, from a mutual acquaintance who still talked to me, that Mike had lost his job, and his parents had indeed sold his apartment, leaving him effectively homeless. Sarah had moved to a different city, apparently unable to face the social fallout. Jake was still living with his parents, struggling with depression, and reportedly blamed everyone but himself for his situation. Their lives were indeed changed, permanently. It wasn't a satisfying ending, not in the way a movie might portray it. There was no grand, triumphant speech, no moment of reconciliation or heartfelt apology, just the cold, hard reality of consequences. And the quiet, aching truth that sometimes people you love can hurt you in ways you never thought possible. But in that ache, there was also growth. I had learned a painful but invaluable lesson about discernment, about boundaries, and about trusting my gut. I had learned that I was stronger than I thought. I had learned that I could pick myself up, even after being knocked down by the very people I trusted most. The house was truly mine now, not just legally but emotionally. It was a place of peace, a testament to my resilience. And while the scars of their betrayal would always remain, they no longer defined me. They were just part of my story. My very long, very painful, but ultimately very empowering story. It's been a year, a full year since I stood on my porch, shivering, staring at the new lock on my own front door. A year since I typed out that frantic call to the locksmith. A year since my world imploded and then slowly, painstakingly began to rebuild. My life is different now, profoundly different. The quiet of my house used to feel empty, sometimes lonely. Now it feels like a sanctuary, a place where I can truly be myself, without judgment, without constantly feeling like I am being taken advantage of. I've filled it with things that bring me joy. Art from local artists, a small but growing collection of plants, a comfortable armchair by the window where I can read for hours. It reflects me, just me. I still go to the book club. I've made real friends there. People who are genuinely interested in ideas, in conversations, in mutual support. Chloe, the barista, and I have become close. She's kind, funny, and incredibly understanding. I eventually told her the whole story. She listened with quiet empathy, her eyes filled with a deep sorrow for what I'd endured, but also a profound respect for how I handled it. Knowing that I can trust someone, truly trust them, again, is a huge step. It's terrifying, but it's also liberating. The legal proceedings wrapped up months ago. They paid the full settlement. The criminal charges went through. I don't know the exact outcome, but I know it involved community service, a permanent record, and a hefty fine. Justice as much as it can be. I try not to think about them, about their lives anymore. They are a closed chapter, a dark, painful one, but closed. Sometimes a fleeting memory will surface. A joke Mike told, Sarah's infectious laugh, Jake's goofy dance moves. And for a split second, the ache is there. The phantom limb of a friendship that died a brutal death. But the ache fades quickly, replaced by the quiet strength I've built. The realization that those memories, the good ones, were likely built on a foundation of lies. They weren't real friends, not truly. They were opportunists. And recognizing that, truly internalizing it, is its own kind of closure. I am more cautious now, wary of people who ask too many questions about my finances, or who seem too eager to move in, or who make promises they don't keep. I've learned to set boundaries, firm ones. I've learned to say no. I've learned that my generosity should be given to those who earn it, not those who demand it. I think back to that phrase, "They left me on a prank camping trip. I am home. The locks are changed. Good luck." That good luck wasn't just a threat or a moment of angry defiance. It was a declaration. A declaration of war, yes, but also a declaration of survival. It was me telling them and myself that I would not be defeated. That even after the deepest betrayal, I would find my way back. And I did. I found my way back to my home. I found my way back to myself. The person I am now is different. Wiser. More resilient. The naive, trusting kid is gone, replaced by someone who understands the true depths of human cruelty, but also the incredible power of human resilience. I still go camping sometime. Not in the deep wilderness, but in managed parks, with friends who I know will never leave me behind. And when I sit by the fire, watching the embers glow, I don't think of their betrayal. I think of the cool night air, the smell of wood smoke, and the quiet comfort of being safe, secure, and truly free. Life goes on. The world didn't stop because my heart was broken. It spun, and I spun with it, finding my footing, learning to dance to a different tune. It wasn't easy. It was heartbreaking, but it was also the making of me. And for that, in a strange, twisted way, I am grateful. Good luck indeed. To them, for having to live with what they did. And to me, for building a life stronger and truer than anything they could ever have imagined.